So now that you have read through the information that is given in the case study 2.3, okay, so what we understand over here in this particular case study, we understand very well that it is talking about Bangladesh, and where in Bangladesh we have spoken that Bangladesh had been developing. It has compared a few years. There is a change of difference of years that has been spoken about. It is speaking about 1970 to 2017. Okay, now in the year 1917, if you can see the table that is given over there. In the year 1917, if you check the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary sector, you can see that 53% of the population, or the net output, okay, 53% of the net output that was coming from for Bangladesh was from the primary sector. 15% was there, and 32% was coming from the tertiary sector. And in the year of 2017, it is 15% only was coming from the primary sector, and 29% was coming from the secondary sector. Tertiary sector accounted for 56%. Okay, now in the first paragraph, it is saying that in the year of 1970, Bangladesh was based on agriculture. What they were basing themselves on, it was primarily the agriculture that they were focusing on. Okay, making, growing food, crop, and everything, either for export and for consumption within the country. And secondary sector was not much developed in back in 1970. Neither was the tertiary sector. Very few people were working in the tertiary sector as well. But in the year of 2017, what is it saying? It is saying that Bangladesh drastically and severely changed. How did it change? It changed because of the manufacturing units. Okay, manufacturing was the business that was started in Bangladesh. Okay, manufacturing is nothing but people were starting to move from the primary sector to the secondary sector, isn't it? Many of the industries were established. Specifically, the industries that are mentioned is food processing and clothing industries. And even I have given you the example that there are certain companies like Zara and H&M. They have their production of clothing from Bangladesh itself. Okay, so since the labor is cheaper there, they have established their manufacturing units over there. Okay, and then the tertiary sector, it also developed in it. Okay, that means the tertiary sector, people from the primary sector also moved into the tertiary sector. And the tertiary sector was transport, finance, and telecommunication were the things. Okay, now based on this case study, there are questions asked. There are three questions asked. Let's consider that. Explain two possible reasons. Two reasons he's asking why the relative importance of primary output has fallen. The relative the reasons why the importance of primary output has fallen is because of the introduction of the manufacturing industries in Bangladesh. Okay, mainly the food processing and the clothing. That was one. And the second thing was establishment of the tertiary services such as telecommunication, transportation, and finance. People moved from the primary sector to the secondary sector, and so the national output from the primary sector has fallen down. Okay, the second question is, would workers who formerly worked in agriculture find it easy to obtain jobs in the secondary and the tertiary sector of industry? No, it would not be. And he's asking, explain your answer, because the primary sector is basically based on the natural resources. Either it is growing or mining of natural resources, whereas the secondary and the tertiary sector required them to work on machineries, and they had to have a skilled jobs were required to work on the machineries, isn't it? You cannot just go and start working on a particular machinery. So it was not easy for them. It was not easy for them to transit from the primary industry to the secondary industry. Okay, so it would be difficult for them. Why? Because the establishment of the industries use of machineries, and machineries need a particular skilled workers to work on them. Okay, so it was difficult for them to find their jobs. Moving to the next question, what do you expect to happen to the relative importance of the tertiary industries if income continues to rise in Bangladesh? If income is continuing to rise in Bangladesh, then the tertiary sector, okay, tertiary industries will also grow. Okay, accounting most of the national output of Bangladesh from the tertiary sectors. Okay, this would be the proper answers that you can give for your questions. Moving on to the next page, it is talking about mixed economy. Before I go to the mixed economy, there are certain points that I want to discuss in here. We have understood the difference between industrialization and deindustrialization, isn't it? People, when they're moving from primary sector to the secondary sector, this process is called as industrialization. And when people are moving from the secondary sector to the primary sector, that is what is called as deindustrialization. In some countries, there is decline in the secondary sector and growth in the primary sector, that would sum up to the deindustrialization as well. Okay, there's some key information given over there on the same page, where changes in sector importance is spoken about. And over there, they're talking about, South Korea is one of the best examples of the country which has experienced changes in the importance of the industrial sector. In the 1950s, economy was dependent on agriculture. 2017, agriculture and the primary industries accounted just 4% of the GDP, with manufacturing secondary responsible for about 42% of the output. Service industries, tertiary, produced 54% of the total output. Okay, he's given an example of, as this case study speaks about Bangladesh, another example of the Korean country, South Korea, is given over there, which says that 1950 and 2017 has been taken into consideration for South Korea. And they are speaking that, in the year 1950, it was all agriculture based. Okay, it was based on agriculture, but in 2017, in this agriculture, or the primary sector, was only 4%, whereas the secondary sector accounted up to 42%, and 54% was coming from the tertiary sectors of the industry. So how much of development has taken place in South Korea, you can see it over here. Okay, another key information that is given to us is Mexico now has 25% of the, that was one of the case studies that is mentioned over here, and questions based on this can be asked as well in the examination. Not the same particular thing, but comparison can be given, and you need to write down your answers based on this. Okay, now another key information given over here is Mexico now has 25% of its labor force employed in manufacturing, as it is making a major contribution to the changing economy of the country. Its secondary sector produces over a third of its 2.2 trillion GDP. It is now the USA's second largest export market and third largest source of imports. The main secondary industry is car manufacturing, and it can not only export to USA but also to Asia, Australia and New Zealand from ports of South of Pacific coast. However, aerospace manufacturing is growing at 20% per year. It is the fifth largest exporter of the medical devices in the world, and its domestic appliances such as refrigerators, washers, and TVs make up half of the retail sales of appliances sold in USA. Okay, Mexico he's talking about. Okay, these were the Asian countries that we have spoken about, because Asia, if you consider, is still considered to be a developing continent. Why? Because of the backward countries that we have, like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, some of the Arab states, and then we have the Korean countries and all, Indonesia, Philippines. These are all developing countries. They're not very well developed countries yet. Okay, but if you consider the USA, the United States of America, and the North American continent, the countries over there are very much developed. And so now he's talking about Mexico, wherein he's saying that, their maximum output, okay, out of the total 2.2 trillion output, they are getting major of it from the sales or manufacturing of cars, manufacturing of appliances, just the TV washers and refrigerators. And they are not just manufacturing for their own country, but they are manufacturing and selling it over to the other countries overseas as well. Okay, so these are the case studies that you need to just read and have an idea of how the development is taking place in the world. Okay, then let's move to another part of this chapter, which is called as the mixed economy. What does this term mixed economy mean? Okay, mixed economy is wherein before I jump into the mixed economy, I'll just give you a brief of the sectors that we have studied. Depending upon the income, okay, or economy of the country, the economy is divided into three categories. One is called as a primary, okay, the secondary, and the tertiary is what we have in our hand. Okay, these are the three sectors that we have been classified. The economy has been classified into. Now, classification of businesses. This chapter is what we are talking about, the classification of businesses. Okay. When I talk about classification of businesses, classification can be done based on the ownership. Okay, and people will say, yes, most of the businesses can be classified as government businesses, government owned businesses, and the private owned businesses. Okay, there are two types of businesses in the country operating. Okay, now any economy, any country is having two types of businesses. One is the privately owned businesses. Okay, now that is called as the private sector. Okay, private sector means you and I, if we are having our businesses, that business is personal to you and it is personal to me. Your business to you, my business to me. That is what is called as the primary sector, private sector. Okay, privately owned businesses will be there in the country. Okay, and that sums up to the private sector of the economy. Okay, and then comes the public sector. Okay, now publicly owned businesses. Now, what do you understand by public sector? The businesses that are run by the government. Now, who does the government works for? The government works for the public, isn't it? The government works for the public. So, any business that the government is running, what are the types of businesses that the government is running? Can you name a few? Good, if you have been able to. If you have not been able to, just chill and relax over here. First is the RTA, Roads and Transport Authority. Second is the water and electricity supply. Okay. Next is the medical health services, isn't it? The educational system. Educational system is there. So these are the things that a government is supposed to take care of. And for whom are they going to do it? They are going to do it for the public, isn't it? So the businesses which are run by the government, owned by the government, are called as the businesses that fall under the category of the public sector. Okay, public sector, because they are operated mainly for the public. Now, private sector businesses are malls, Al Futtaim malls you can take into consideration if you are living in the Gulf. Okay, city centers you have, and malls are there. Then there is this shops are there, restaurants are there. Okay, restaurants are there. These all fall under the category of the privately owned businesses. I am not going to manufacture electricity and supply to the people. I am going to open a restaurant, provide service to the people, and just I am providing service to the people. I am not mandatory. It is not mandatory for me to provide service to all people. Suppose I open a restaurant. Let's take an example of a restaurant. Okay, the food in my restaurant is for 500 dirhams. Now, can a poor person be able to afford it? No. Okay, we're talking about 500 AED. Can a poor person be able to afford it? It is not possible for him to afford it in 2024. In the year 2024, it is not possible to afford him, for a poor person to afford a food, a meal, a particular plate of food for 500 dirhams. Okay, but now, if suppose there is a public sector business, a public sector opens a restaurant. If in case they open a restaurant, then they are supposed to provide the food for 5 AED. Okay, so that all the people, whether rich or middle class or poor, they are all supposed to be able to eat from this particular restaurant. But whereas a privately owned restaurant or a business can operate at any cost, and he can provide service to any people he wants. Now, there is another brother of him. He is opening a restaurant and he provides food for 1 AED only. Only parathas and sandwiches he is selling. Okay, 1 AED. Only 1 AED. Now, he is providing service to all. But not necessarily his business is going to be a public business. No. Because it is owned by the private individuals. Common people like you and I are opening it. Any business that is run by common people, like your father has a business, my mom has a business, I have a business, those fall under the category of the private businesses, and they fall under the category of the private sector. What do they fall under the category of? They fall under the category of the private sector. Whereas the public sector means they are operated by the public government. Government, who is the government? We choose the government. So government is nothing but public itself, right? From among us, हम लोग क्या करते हैं, हमारे अंदर से थोड़े रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स को हम चूज करते हैं जो हमारी कंट्री को चलाते हैं. They're not some rulers or something. They're not kings or princesses of that particular land. They are from among us. We are choosing them, allowing them to rule our country and guide us. So government owned businesses fall under the category of the public sector, and the businesses run by common peoples of the country fall under the category of the public sector. Okay, now government, this is depending upon the ownership. You understood what is a public sector business and the private sector businesses. Let's talk about how do they operate. For a public sector business, profit is not the aim. Profit is not what they are operating for. They are operating for providing services to the people. Whereas a private sector business, he is operating to make himself rich. Profit is the only reason. Yeah, service may be the thing, but a little less. Okay, but a little less. He is going to provide service to earn the profits. But he is supposed to provide the service whether or not he is going to earn the profit out of it. That is what is the difference between them. Okay, and in a private sector business, the sole decision is the owner's. Okay, the owner is the sole decision maker. Okay, he's going to be the one who's going to decide like what is going to be happening, how much of price he's going to set on the particular goods and services and everything. वो सब कुछ owner decide करता है. Whereas in this, they cannot change the price. Okay, price, if you are considering here, the owner has the right to increase the price or decrease the price. But for a public sector thing, the prices, the decisions, all are very crucial to take. All of these decisions are very crucial for them to take into consideration. So let's just quickly give it a recap. There is two types of businesses acting in the country, and they fall under they have been categorized as private sector businesses and the public sector businesses. Okay, what is a private sector business? A business which is owned and run. Okay, owned and run by private individuals, private or common people of the country. Okay, common people of the country. That type of business is called as the private sector businesses. Whereas the public, and they operate for profits. They are usually going to offer for profits. Okay, even if they are providing a service, that service will be profitable for them. Suppose I am giving you valet parking. Okay, when you come to my restaurant, your car will be parked by one of the workers at my store. Okay, so with that what's gonna happen, since I'm providing you parking, I'm going to increase the food charges in my restaurant. Okay, the prices will be high. That is what is a private sector. Whereas a public sector, it is owned and run by the government. Owned and run by the government. Government is nothing but the public itself, because we choose the leaders through elections, right? We give voting, they are elected, and then they are going to be working for us. So it is public sector businesses. Now, after that, their aim is not profit. They don't operate for profits. They are operating for providing services. Okay, even if they are providing the services, they cannot increase the price of the products, is what we understand here. Moving ahead.